Good evening, crafting friends. I'm Dorene Decibus from It Begins with Ink and Paper, and welcome to Simply Stamping Sunday. I hope you've had a great first day of autumn. I know it was beautiful here in New Hampshire, and I hope it was beautiful wherever you are from. I know it just was another one of those perfect first of fall days. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of show and tell before we get into tonight's card making. If you were able to join me on Friday night, you saw me make this card here, which was my Fun Fold Friday, and it is a floating accordion card. So if I take the belly band off the card, you can see where the floating panels come from. It's these panels right here that just seem to float. The card stands up like this, so it can stand, and it gives you those different panels. And when it opens up, it says, "Wishing you and yours a season of wonder and happiness." So that was my Fun Fold Friday, and I've actually been working on a couple of classes this weekend. I hope I have these in plastic, so I'm hoping they won't shine too much in the light, but I'm working on we're having, my friend Leslie and I are having a Autumn Splendor class with the Autumn Expressions bundle and the Splendid Autumn Designer Series paper, and we're making these beautiful cards with all of this. We have a Fun Fold here that will be part of the class, and then we even have a beautiful shaped card as well, using some of our dies. So that's one class that's coming up on October 26th here in Keene. It is a class that is going to be available to go as well. And then another class that I'm working on, that I worked on this weekend, has to do with our Super Saturday event on November 8th. Oh, let me just check that date. I'm not sure if it is November 8th. That might be our registration deadline. I think it's actually November 21st. So let me just double check in my notebook. Yeah, I believe it's the 21st. But this is one of the classes where you'll be taking the stamps from the Christmas Wishes kit and creating these 5 additional cards. And then you will be able to, you'll also have a kit so that you can create the 8 cards that go along with the kit. So this will be a really fun class too. Be watching out on my Facebook business page to see when I put out the registration information for those events. So this is week 4 of using Simply Said and Regal Floral. I've had so much fun this month, and the lucky thing about September is that there are 5 Sundays in it, so we have one more week next week. So we are going to get going right away. So the 4th week of the month for me is the 3rd or the 4th is usually Fun Folds, and that's what it's going to be tonight. So I'm going to be doing some simple Fun Folds with you. This is our first Fun Fold. It uses the beautiful Regal Winter Designer Series paper and a piece of the Simple Season of Elegance Designer Series paper to make this beautiful Fun Fold. So let's get started and go over what we need. Of course, I didn't print out my cheat sheet, so we're just gonna wing it along and use my measurement on the cutter for this. So I have here a piece of cardstock that measures 5.5 by 7 inches, and I have scored this at 2 7/8 of an inch, I think. Or if I go the other way, I've scored it. No, I scored it at 4 1/4. Excuse me. I scored it 4 1/4 inches to make the card base, and so I'm just going to fold this over. As always, I will be putting all the measurements in the comments, and I will be adding, I'll be putting all the measurements in the comments when this is all said and done. And this is a piece of cherry cobbler that is a 4x4 inch square that I have scored at 1 inch using my paper cutter. And this is going to make that fold that is going to fold over like this. So just to give you an idea of how that's going to work. All right, so the next part is the basic white cardstock. We are going to need, and I've got one more sheet of real red, we're going to need a piece that measures 4 by 5 1/4 to be on the inside of our card. We are going to need a piece of the cherry cobbler that measures 3 by 2 inches. This is going to be for our tag on the front. And then I have a piece that's just 1/8 of an inch less on both sides for our to stamp our tag. I also have some scraps to stamp the flower images that I've already cut out, but I'll show you those stamped. And then for designer series paper, I have a piece of that season of Elegance that has just the beautiful splatter of gold in different places on the piece of paper, just so that you can see that it measures 2.5 by 5 1/4. And then I have a piece that's going to go inside that is just 1/2 inch that also measures 5 1/4. And then the piece of designer series paper that's going to go on the front of our card measures 2 3/4 by 3 3/4. So I think that's it. So let's do some stamping to get started. So on this piece of basic white cardstock, which is going on my label, I'm going to start with the Shaded Spruce ink, and I'm going to stamp my leaves that are going to go underneath my, actually I'm going to stamp my grading first so that I know where I can stamp. So I'm going to use the cherry cobbler for this. So let's just put this out of the way for a minute. And I am going to stamp Sending Love Your Way. So let me ink this up. Make sure it's nicely inked. And this is going to go right on the bottom of that piece of cardstock. I want to do that because I want to make sure I have room to put my leaves. So I'm going to take these 2 small pieces of scrap, and I'm going to take my flower, and I'm just going to stamp one on each that I can then trim later on. They cut out so nicely. You can buy the bundle if you have a stamping, emboss, and die cutting machine, but I just cut these out by hand. So I'll just set these over here, and those I'll cut out and use later. Now I'm going to stamp the greenery, and this way I know I'm not going to hit my sentiment. There we go. Let's get that out of the way. And then what I'm going to do is to take the 2 pieces of the 2 little flowers I cut out, and I am going to attach them to the front of my card. There we go. And this will now go on to that piece of red cardstock. And that is what our label looks like for the front of the card. So pretty. Okay, set that aside. let's get this put together the way we want it put together. So this needs to go onto, I'm going to add some adhesive here. And this is going to go right centered onto the card. I want it even with the side of the card. So it's going to open up and look like that. Then what I'm going to do is add this piece of the Season of Elegance Designer Series paper, a little scrap. I'm going to leave a little bit of an edge around that. There we go. And then this is just going to be attached to the inside of the card. It's important to attach this flap first because you don't want it to, you want it to be covered up. You don't want it to be on the outside. So there we go. That covers that up. And now we're ready to just add our Designer Series paper. So I'm going to start with this piece first from the Season of Elegance. And it's going to just go right here on the front piece. And this piece is going to go on the front flap. Like I said, this is a really easy card, easy fun fold to do. And the reason I put my piece of paper, instead of being on the bottom, over here on the left is because you can see some of that white underneath. Now, I want to add this right to the front, but I want to make sure I'm not going to put the adhesive anywhere but where it needs to go. So, we just want it on that flap. So I'm going to center that on. And card number 1 is complete. Isn't that a beautiful fun fold? I love it. And a beautiful card using this set. Okay, so let's move those out of the way. Go to our second card of the evening. This is what our second card is going to look like. And what I'm going to be doing to make this fun fold is I'm actually going to be cutting a piece of the card off. So I am going to be cutting, let's see, a 1 3/4 inch piece off. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that. All right, so what do we need for materials for this? We're going to need a piece of 5.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock that I am just going to fold in half. Now, to make this, I am going to have to make that cut. Now, I could do one of two things. I can make the cut and leave this piece on and just adhere it down, or I can make the cut and cut the whole thing off. So what I'm going to do with my paper trimmer, because I want it here on my right-hand side of the card, I'm going to put this in at 1, I think I said 1 1/4. Let me just double check with my ruler. Nope, it was 1 3/4. So I am going to put this piece in at 1 3/4, and then I'm going to use the guide on my paper trimmer to cut that down to the score line. And then what I can do is put that in, and again, cut down to the mark. Take that piece off. All right. So now we're ready to go ahead and do some decorating. So that 1 3/4 inch. We can just trim down to this piece. This is for our stamped image. So let me just make sure I take the right piece. Yes. So this piece here, the basic black, measures 3 7/8 by 1 5/8, and the piece of white that we're stamping measures 3 3/4 by 1 1/2. And so I am going to be stamping with Memento Black and the Blackberry Bliss to go with the cardstock. So I'm going to take the small flower from the set, and I'm going to stamp that on the left side. And then I am going to take the stamp that says "Wishing I Were There to Give You a Hug." I'm going to ink that up into the Memento Black, and I am going to stamp that right beside the flower. There we go. Let's close these ink pads. Alright, so we can put this on that small piece of black. Oh, I got ink on it. Shoot. Okay, well, let's hate that when that happens. I don't know if you can see, I got an ink smudge. Didn't realize the ink had gotten on my finger. And so I'm just going to take that off, and I'm going to grab another piece of white cardstock. So this is 3 3/4 by 1 1/2. So hopefully I won't get, I've got ink all over my hands. Of course I do. It always happens. I don't know about you, but I always make sure I close my ink pads for this very reason, because I just, oh my goodness, I just always get ink all over myself. I'm always glad, especially on a Sunday night when I've been stamping all weekend, to go take a shower and wash my hair, and that usually helps get all that soapy stuff on my hair. Usually gets a lot of the ink out, but I usually still have a lot. So let's try this again. So I'm going to start by stamping the greeting onto this, and I'm going to stamp it to the right so that I have room for the flower. That's actually a little centered more, so maybe it was a good thing I made a mistake. And then I'm going to take the Blackberry Bliss, and I'm going to stamp the little tiny flower over to the left of the greeting. There we go. It fits in so nicely. And hopefully I don't have, whoops, and there goes the black sheet of paper. Hopefully I don't have any ink on my hands now. Let me grab that black piece of cardstock. And let's put some adhesive on this and try it again. Much better. Okay, let's set that aside. Now I'm going to be mounting all of my scraps of designer series paper onto some different pieces of white cardstock. So you need 2 that measure 3 1/2 by 4. So I have those 2 here. You need a piece of the designer series paper that measures 3 1/4 by 3 3/4. You'll need a piece of white that measures 1 1/2 by 4, and then this piece of designer series paper measures 1 1/4 by 3 3/4. All right, so let's get these attached to the cardstock. So again, because this is a darker piece of cardstock, I want it to, designer series paper, I want it to be able to have the lighter pieces. Okay, just got a few little errant pieces there. Okay, so now let's start putting this together. So on the inside of the card, we're going to put this first piece of basic white cardstock in, and then we're going to add this piece with the designer series paper, and this is going to show on the front of the card when we close it. There we go. I do have a scrap of the designer series paper that I'm just going to kind of mount on the left hand side, or I could mount it down here, but I think I'm going to do the left hand side. I love using as much designer series paper as I can in these designs because the designer series paper is so pretty. Okay, so that's the inside and the side of the card. So this piece now will go on the front of the card. Just center the panel. It's easier if I open it up to make sure I'm centering it correctly. There we go. And now all I have to do is add this piece. And again, I'm going to center this on the front, but I'm going to make sure that I don't put any of the adhesive where it's going to stick, causing the card to close. So we'll center this again on the front of the card, and there we go. Card number 2 is done. All right, let's go on to the last card. This one uses Night of Navy, so of course that's my favorite. I love Night of Navy, and we're going to do a little fun fold with this one too as well. And this is what the card looks like. It shows off the designer series paper nicely. So let's do our, let me get out the different pieces. You're going to need an 8.5 by 5.5 piece of Night of Navy cardstock. It's going to be scored at the 4 1/4 mark, and it's also going to be scored at the 1 1/4 mark. So I'm going to just close this shut. Before I do anything with that fold, I'm going to take my little set of leaves, and I'm going to use Night of Navy ink, and I'm going to create a background. This will be tone on tone. It's going to be beautiful on the card. I can go in lots of different directions. You're not going to see this piece here where I've scored, but it's all right if I go over it a little bit as I am doing my stamping. And I'm just going to get a tissue to make sure that extra ink that gets on the glass doesn't get on my fingers. So I'm just going in random style, just filling in the image all across. I'll show it to you. Let me just again wipe up some of that blue ink. There we go. I'm going to leave that open because we're going to do some more with it, but this is what the background now looks like. If you can see that carefully, it's just so pretty. Because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over, and like I said, I'm going to be covering up part of what I just stamped, and I'm going to adhere this down. So I'm just going to add 2 strips of adhesive, and I'm going to close that like that. Then I'm going to take a piece of designer series paper that measures 1 by 5 1/4, and it's going to go right on to that. Let's just get that tape runner working, and it's just going to go on the back side And then I am going to add this to the front. There we go. Then I'm going to take another piece of this beautiful designer series paper. This one measures 1.5 by 5.25, and it is going to go on the right side of the inside of the card. So when you close this, you're going to see another panel of this beautiful designer series paper like that. And then I am going to take a third piece of the designer series paper that measures 2 3/4 by 5.25, and it's going to go in the inside of the other panel. Like I said, it's one of the things I love about fun folds is that you can really use them to show off the designer series paper. And then for my white panel, so I can write a little message, I have one that measures 2.5 inches by 5.25 inches. So I'm just going to add some adhesive to that, and I'm going to put that right in the inside as well. And now we have our card. So finally, we're going to do some stamping. So I'm going to start on this piece of cardstock that measures 2.25 by 2.5, and I'm going to, in the Night of Navy ink, stamp the hello from the Simply Said stamp set right in the right hand, towards the right hand corner. And then I'm going to take my leaf step set again, stamp, and I am going to stamp in it once in first generation ink, and then stamp it again in the second generation ink. So you get this beautiful change in color on the label, and it just looks so soft like that. Okay, let's close up this lid, and I'm going to adhere that to a piece of Night of Navy that measures 2 3/8 by 2 5/8. It is so pretty. I love this card. And then what am I going to do? I am going to do the same thing I've done on my other cards tonight. I'm going to be centering this a little bit or where I want it, and I'm going to make sure I mark with my finger where to not add adhesive so that I can add the adhesive to the right spot so it doesn't close my card away. So I'm going to place that on the front, make sure it's centered, and now we have our third fun fold of the night. So tonight's beautiful cards, we started with, let me just get the ink and stamps out of the way. We started with this fun fold. We then went to this fun fold, and we ended with this fun fold. So a fun night for fun folds with the Regal floral set. Now I have to tell you, you do not want to miss next week's edition of Simply Stamping Sunday, because I am going to show you a template with the designer series paper that you can create 9 super fast cards in. Like, it's just amazing. So you'll need, if you want to follow along, you'll need 9 card bases that just measure 5.5 by 8.5, and you're going to need 2 sheets of coordinating paper, designer series paper, that measures 6 by 12. I'm going to show you how to cut it. I'll give you a template, and I will put the cards together in a really fun 5th week of Simply Stamping Sunday. And so we'll end the month big, and by making those 9 cards, we will have made 22 cards this month, which is amazing. So you have lots of ideas for this stamp set and designer series paper. And of course, I'll be back Friday night for another edition of Fun Fold Friday. I hope everyone has a fabulous week, and I hope to see you Friday night. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining me.